What's going on, you guys? This is Aaron from Departures Capital, and we're here with John Feneck, CEO of Feneck Consulting and Portfolio Manager in the mining sector. Always a pleasure to have you on, John, talking gold, silver, commodities, and everything in between. How are you doing today?
Great, Aaron. Thanks for having me on again.
Yes, of course. So when we last spoke, we were discussing the technicals when it comes to gold. You know, we were talking about the gold price being at 1900 last year, basing around that area, 2300 this year. Now that we've broken 2500, it's actually over 2600 today. What does this mean for gold stocks since many of them haven't caught up yet? Yet the environment is feeling pretty positive, but a lot of the small caps haven't moved. What's your take on this?
Yeah, great question. Very frustrating for investors, including myself. 41% of my portfolio is in gold stocks as of August 31st. So I am betting for a catch up here. I feel very confident and lose zero sleep that that is going to happen. We own about 12.5% in GDX and GDXJ, which are the two major ETFs in the gold space. Those are filled, those ETFs are filled with gold producers, right? So you have to have some of your portfolio in gold producers here because when you look at Agnico, right, AEM, this is the poster child, I think, for what can go right in gold miners. It's up over 60% year to date. It still is not overvalued, in my opinion, at $81. I mean, it touched 84 just yesterday. So I think there's some more upside left in the name. Their earnings have been great, January, April, and July. So when you look at the majors like that, Newmont, Barrick, they're all putting up good numbers. And I think they're only going to get better because now they're clipping a higher margin, right? Like if you look at where the gold price has been since July's report, which will come out in October, these companies have been clipping a higher margin. And so like it's just going to be better for their bottom line and producing more free cash flow. So you have to have some money in producers. But to your point, the little guys in gold have hardly done anything yet. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me that you're seeing gold at an all-time high literally day after day, and some of these things barely move. So that's really your opportunity as an investor right now. I mean, we look at stuff like Next Gold. Let me double check the symbol, NXGCF. They just had a symbol change. Next Gold is the old Treasury metals, which I think we talked about one time on your show, right around this price. It really hasn't moved at all. But I think that's going to change because now they've partnered with one of Frank Justra's companies. And when you look at their all in like, sustaining cost for the project in Canada, it's around 10.50 an ounce. I mean, this is like a viable project that yes would get built in 2029 or 2030, right? That's where the rub is, I think, with some of these companies is that they're 5 years away, right? However, now that Frank is involved, don't you think Frank is more aggressive than most gold guys? I mean, he's going to be out there looking for acquisitions, I think, and it's not out of the question that they would do some type of transaction over the next 6 to 12 months, maybe one or two, that would get them to a nearer term production profile than say 5 years from now. And then what? Like Jeremy Wyeth as a leader can actually, take a team and mobilize it. He's done this throughout his 25 plus year career multiple times in much worse jurisdictions than this. So like I think that stock right now at 51 cents US is just insanely priced. I think it's going up substantially just based on the fact that they have over 3.5 million ounces of gold, and they could be a takeover candidate themselves, next year or the year after if this keeps up. Another one that I've been looking at more closely is Inflection Resources, AUCUF in the States, AUCU in Canada. And that's because they've really partnered with Anglo to really offset a lot of their spend, right? In terms of drilling, as you know, it's very expensive no matter where you're at. This particular company is in New South Wales. So Australia is just a great jurisdiction. I've made it one of my points this year to increase my Australian gold positions because I was underweight going into the year. And this is one that's still cheap. It's unbelievable. It's trading at 11 cents US. It got below that yesterday. I think Alistair has got a good idea of what he needs to do here. And with a partner like Anglo, it makes all the sense in the world to buy something cheaply here. So those are two names that I'm following in the smaller gold space.
So we talk a lot about gold, it gets a lot of attention. What about silver?
Yeah. Silver, of course, is our largest holding, and even though that's the case, every time I was on your show last year, I said, as you know, I did wouldn't break 26, and I was correct. This year, I flip flopped and said, look, it's going to break 30. Like this, there's no way this isn't going to break 30. It's just going to take a few months, and that's exactly what happened, right? We broke 30 with authority a few months ago. We then retraced some of that gain, which is a healthy chart action, believe it or not. No one wants to see it, right? You don't want to see 32.50 go to 27.50. But then now we're over 31 as we record this, right? So you're seeing this retracement back to test the year-to-date high
Mm.
of 32 and a half ish. And I think you're going to break through that now with all the uncertainty leading up to the US election November 5th, the BRICS October 22nd. I mean, I don't know if you saw the article on Kitco yesterday, but Putin is having the BRICS meeting in Russia this year, and he said he's got over 40 countries lined up that are just dying to get into the BRICS, including Indonesia, which is pretty wild because that's where 70% of the nickel production comes from in the world. So, you start seeing these kind of things, you know, play out over the next couple of months, Aaron. And I think silver will start to act more as a precious metal than people think. And why is that? Well, look at other periods of strife in the last few years. In COVID, silver got killed and then it bounced real hard April and May of 2020. And we were buying the triple ETF back then on silver. We wouldn't recommend that here, but at 17 silver or wherever it was like, come on, this is insane. um, now you've got the ability to buy dips, right? If you saw that breakout to 32 and a half, if you were patient, you could have bought it in the 27s just a couple of weeks ago. And now it's back to 31. That's silver for you. It doesn't care about your timeline. It's going to do whatever it's going to do. And it's always done this if you look at charts going back to the 1980s. So, that 3250 level, I think, is going to get taken out this time. We'll break 33 to the upside, and then it's a test of 35. There's really no resistance until 35. And if you break 35, it's going to be go time in silver, and you'll wish you had all these silver juniors. So let's talk about a couple. I've mentioned Aftermath on your program probably 5 times in the last 3 years. We mentioned it this year. I went back and looked at 14 cents, 17 cents, and 20 cents. And now it's trading at 34 cents US today. So why is that? Well, silver's in an uptrend. And also Eric Sprott, who saw Michael Williams' company present at Beaver Creek last week, called the company on Monday the 16th and said, "Hey, I want to put another chunk of money to work in your stock," which is very, very positive. Now Eric owns 19.2% of Aftermath Silver. I used to work for Sprott. I can tell you he's got a lot of 5% name positions. He's got a lot of 9.9% positions. I don't know too many positions he's got close to 20% because he's got a lot of conviction in this stock. And I think some of that comes from the fact that they're not just a silver and copper play anymore. They now can pivot into manganese down the road because that February 29th news item that you and I have talked about is critical. It's like 99.9% battery grade, manganese lets them pivot into a different part of the commodities world, which is very positive. And they announced some more positive news early September, but another 5 million coming in from Eric Sprott, who clearly is not going to be, selling shares cheaply, is a positive to help the company keep going and probably increase their drilling profile. The second name in silver that I would look at is a new one for me. I just met them at Beaver Creek last week, but sounds pretty compelling, and that's Luca Mining, LUCMF in the States. I met with Javier. Javier basically owns almost 50%, 50, of the float. That is amazing to me that a junior can be half owned by one person, but Javier really has a lot of, I'd say, passion for the space. He has two projects, not one, in Mexico. He produced record revenues just at the last week of August. So if you look at the news items, that happened. And then they did a financing. So the stock got really hit here. And he was telling me, look, this is temporary. We're going to be back to where we were just, a few weeks ago quickly because he's got a lot of people lined up in the financing. And you can see this in the public news. So, stocks like that, Aaron, they have to cash up once in a while, right? And that's what you do as a savvy investor. You take advantage of the opportunity to get into stocks like that where the trend is up, but it got hit for one particular reason, and then it's going to be back to business.
Definitely. Now let's talk about rates. So last time we spoke, the Fed was setting up for its first rate cut. We finally saw it yesterday. It was 0.5%, 50 basis points. At this point, where do you think rates go from here? And, when will we see additional cuts?
Yeah. So there's 19 Fed members, right? Yesterday, they said all 19 are on board with two more cuts at least over the next few months. 17 out of 19 said they were on board with three cuts. And then I don't know about four because I don't think Powell disclosed that exact number. I think it was probably like 10 out of 19 or something. It wasn't like more of a consensus. But imagine three cuts from here. If they were all 50s, which I doubt, we'd get a 2% net move here in rates, which I think that would be really healthy for real estate. That would be really healthy for the economy, really healthy for gold and silver. I mean, you can see the action today, right, Aaron? You saw it right after the Fed announcement yesterday, a huge pop. A lot of the gold and silver stocks popped hard and then they fell at the close. But then today you're getting follow through buying, which is really bullish action.
Definitely. We'll see where it goes. It's going to be exciting. We finally got that first cut, though. I think that's the most important thing. They were like holding off,
Yeah.
didn't want to give us anything. And then, yeah, so we'll see where it goes. But finally, when it comes to individual companies, what other names are you looking at right now? Is there anything else out there on your radar?
Yeah, so I just mentioned nickel because nickel was down 43% last year as a commodity. That's not a stock, that was nickel. And it's too heavily used in economies to be that ridiculously priced, right? And this year it has had a pretty bad year too. Recognize that 68 to 72% of the world's nickel comes from one country, and that's Indonesia. If they were join the BRICS like literally next month, what happens, right? That casts another shadow over Indonesia. And we're already having Samsung and a bunch of companies talk to the guys that I know in North America saying we want to source clean nickel, just like Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk has said this for 3 years in a row for anyone paying attention, right? I mean, like this is a big part of the battery of his cars. So, how do you source North American nickel? Well, you go out and you buy North American nickel stocks. And
Mm.
there's three I can give you guys. I've mentioned Power Nickel on the show before. I love Terry Lynch. I think he's got the exact right attitude for mining in terms of going after short sellers, calling people out for doing weird things. Can I say illegal things? Not necessarily, because some of this stuff, in terms of shorting, is legal, but it's shady, right? And he'll call it out. I'll call it out because I'm not short anything in this sector. I'm an advocate, Aaron. Like this, but I mean, your audience should know that I find it disingenuous that you're going to be shorting mining stocks and then make a living off it, right? So, like, Terry and I are speaking together at the Zurich conference coming up November 10th and 11th. If any of your listeners are European and want to check it out, the last time we spoke together was in Washington, D.C., April 30th. If you look at the stock PNPNF in the States and PNPN, we moved that stock on that presentation. There were 80 to 100 people in the room, and Terry was saying, "Hey, look, we're not a nickel company anymore. We're a nickel and a copper company mixed in with some gold and PGMs, right? So like, they aren't necessarily a third, a third, a third in those buckets, but their copper hits have been just outstanding this year. Pivoting to a really deep value play, premium nickel, PNRLF in the States, PNRL in Canada, just completely trashed. I should be talking to them next week. So by the time we interview again, I'll have an update. But Keith Morrison has raised more money as a nickel junior than any other nickel junior I follow in the last 2 years. I mean, when you raise that kind of money, meaning $50 million plus, that people are really behind your project. Doesn't mean it works,
Mhm.
but they're in Botswana, which is the number one jurisdiction in Africa, and it's ranked the top 20 jurisdiction globally, right? So like, this is something to watch. When a stock gets hit like this, you then call someone like Keith or Jacqueline on the IR side and say, what's going on here? They're both, really sharp people and can really direct investors as to, hey, we got a big seller out there today, or hey, our 4 months and a day come off for financing. We're under pressure right now, but these are temporary things. The last one I'll mention is Stillwater, because I've mentioned that on your show before, and that one I haven't been correct on yet. We mentioned that a lot, probably 11, 12 cents. It's trading at 7.5 right now. But a lot of that, Aaron, is because, nickel, platinum, palladium, they've all been just killed here since the Russian, invasion of February 2022. So, of course, a stock like that that's heavy into those kind of metals where the commodities themselves are falling, the stock's going to fall. But that doesn't mean the project doesn't have merit. They're still connected to a major, they're still in Montana, they're still going to do well over time, and they have a 15% stake from Glencore that they've developed since the last time I mentioned them. So I think PGEZF in the States and PGE in Canada is worth a look.
Awesome. Well, it's always a pleasure, John. I love to hear your opinion on everything gold, rates, individual companies. We'll definitely have to have you back on soon, and things are looking pretty positive. So very excited.
Thanks for having me on, Aaron.